SNS Activewear and Alpha Broder are integrating to become the premier partner for the apparel industry. With one website, one purchase order, over 100 beloved brands, and 14 distribution centers, you can streamline your ordering and operations while being able to hit free freight faster than ever. Benefit from 1 to 2 day shipping with the lowest error rate in the industry, and leverage combined net term limits to benefit your business like never before. Starting May 30th, the Alpha Broder website will be retired. However, customers will now have one login, one experience, and everything they need all at ssactivewear.com.
Hello, and welcome to Promo Insiders, an ASI media podcast that covers the issues that matter most to the promotional products industry. I'm Hannah Rosenberger, ASI's data analytics editor, and today I'm joined by Kailik, National Account Manager at Peerless Umbrella and ASI Media's Supplier Salesperson of the Year. Congratulations, Katie, and thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
So the main focus of our conversation today is how to build strong supplier relationships within the industry. But before we get into that, I would also love to hear a little bit about how you first got into promo.
Well, mine's a little funny. I didn't even know promo existed. I think that's pretty standard unless you had a parent or a family member who was already in it prior to you. Mine is funny because I was dating a guy at the end of college. I just finished my final exam, and we went out for drinks with a bunch of our friends. One of those friends, a few drinks in, let's say, says to me, "So I don't understand. What is your communications degree, and what are you going to do with that?" I go on to give this very lengthy, in-depth description, and he turns around and says, "That sounds just like what my dad does. You should apply at Debco." So I go into this interview, and I did some research on them. I knew it wasn't exactly where my path originally had been leading, but I thought, I'm going to go to the interview. I need practice. So I went, and I ended up loving the company, loving how hands-on everything was at the time. Like, it was all hands on deck. Even the person who was interviewing me, I thought was a UPS driver. He was one of the owners. So anyway, that's how I got started. I landed at Debco. I was there for 5 years or so for my first job. And I will tell you, the funniest moment when it all kind of clicked for me was I'd probably been there for about 6 months. And an order came through that I was working on. And it was for the laundry bags that go to my college freshmen. So every freshman, myself included, on your first week, you would be given this whole like bundle of branded merch. And inside of it, everything was housed, inside of this big, giant laundry bag. So I raced home that day and I whipped my old laundry bag out, flip it inside out, and sure enough, there's the Debco tag. So that was kind of my like, whoa, this makes sense to me now moment.
Awesome. That's great. And obviously, you've done very well since that fateful day way back when. So how do you think about your building relationships in this industry today, especially when it comes to your role now as a supplier?
Yeah, well, I think that my favorite part about this industry is the dynamic that exists between distributors and suppliers. I think it's such a special one because I really see my distributors not as customers, but as my partners. So to me, their client is the client in this situation, but it's the two of us working together to fulfill what they need and keep them happy. So that's really the way I look at it. And when I kind of made that mental shift away from, vendor client dynamic, my business dramatically changed. My reputation, I became much more of an asset to my distributor partners than just another sales rep doing the whole product tour every few months,
Yeah, absolutely. So how do you go about kind of making that mental shift? Kind of what changes did you make in how you were operating and how you were thinking about your clients?
Well, it became a lot less about product at that point and a
Mm,
lot more about how I could be a good partner to these people. Like if I was in their situation, how would I want my partner to support me? So I really started digging in. I started having what I would refer to as like one-on-one business development meetings. And I would show up with no product, just a notebook and a pen, because it was really for me a fact-finding mission. At that point, I wanted to know really basic things, but things that I didn't know about my customers at the time. So things like, what's your goal for the year? Who's your biggest client? Who's taking up the most time of yours? Who are you trying to get into? Like, who are your top prospects for the year? How can I help you be more in front of them? What kind of program can we put in place? What kind of supports can we use to make achieving your goals more manageable this year? And that changed everything. Everything. I became intertwined with the minutia of their day to day. I was no longer just someone they called when they needed product A or product B. I became someone they called for all kinds of things. And it is still that way today.
So I guess once you kind of are at that point where you're starting to build that relationship, how do you, once you've met someone, you're starting to work with them, how do you build on that relationship to turn it into something like that?
Well, understandably so, trust is the cornerstone of making this work. Because if the distributor doesn't have trust that you're going to do what you say, that you're going to keep information that you get confidential, it's scary for them. I can understand that. We see it so often, business moving between accounts. They can be a little fearful. So trust is essential. That starts with utter honesty. So don't promise things that you can't 100% guarantee. If you say you're going to do something, you do it immediately, and really just consistently showing up at the same times all the time when you're supposed to, as you're supposed to. That to me was what helped bridge that gap of trust most effectively. The other thing is, even when you have bad news, you tell the bad news. You tell the bad news. You come prepared with ways to uh, alleviate that, but you don't hide bad news. If it comes out, it can ruin everything that you've built.
Yeah, that was one of the other things I was going to ask you about because I know communication is so important, both in relationship building in general and specifically with this industry that has so many layers before a product gets in the hands of who it's going to. So, how do you think about communication when you're building these relationships?
Communication to me, so I have a background in communications. That's what I studied. It's something even though I don't now work in that field professionally,
Hmm.
I kind of do in a huge way since I am the face of Peerless to all of my accounts. Even if Peerless has an issue, it's me on the hook. Like, it's my face that they know, it's my voice they're familiar with, it's all those things. So for me, I really look at myself. Can you hear my dogs barking? I'm so sorry.
No, you're good.
Okay, good. Um, I really look at myself as their, public relations person in the field too. So drawing kind of on what I know from my education and from my own life experience, like I said, I over communicate, probably sometimes to a fault to some people. I think they eventually get used to it. But really being transparent is the most pivotal thing about all of it. Like, even when something goes wrong, this is the most perfect example I can give you of what makes my method successful. Is I know that if something goes wrong with, let's call her Sarah, maybe I have a customer named Sarah. If something goes wrong with an order that Sarah has, she A, wants to hear it from me. B, she doesn't care how I feel about it. My ego cannot be involved in this. This is not a time to defend yourself. This is not a time to make excuses. It's not about you. As far as Sarah, my customer, is concerned, I have caused a problem for one of her customers, one of her orders. How am I going to fix it? So that's how I find that it's actually those moments, those problems, and there's not many, but when they do happen,
Hmm.
it's how you communicate through that that you really establish that trust and that belief and that partnership with each other.
Yeah, I know. Like you said, these big problems don't happen often, but when they do,
No,
definitely a time for learning. So I also was curious to hear, either when you first started at Peerless or when you were first starting out in the industry, what was one of the biggest lessons you learned about trying to build up these relationships?
it would definitely be what I just said about the ego. Like you have to check your ego at the door. No one has time for you to be upset about it or to go over all the different things that went right. What they really need for you to do is to apologize, to let them know that you're on it, that your full attention is invested in correcting this, and to give them the first few steps of what you are going to be doing to correct it. And then once you've gone through those, where are you now? Okay, what's the next step? And then what's the next step? That I find is just it makes all the difference. Just over communicating because they are concerned on their end, but they're kind of stuck in limbo. They are kind of just waiting for you to come back with information. So the sooner that you can get them updates without them having to come and ask for it, the better it is for all of us.
Um, Going back a bit to something you said towards the beginning here about, you start off some of these relationships without product conversation, getting to
Mhm.
know the business, getting to know who your clients are. So when you're at that point, how do you make the pivot to starting to talk about products and starting to talk about sales after you build that foundation?
I only talk about product as it relates to my customers or my partners and users. It's the only way that it makes sense to them either, if we're honest. A product is just a product until you position it in a way that is sellable and that makes sense to the goals of that end user. So, like a great example would be, I have this adorable tiny umbrella. It folds down to only about, let's say, it is 7.5 inches when it's totally folded. It fits in the back pocket of your jeans. Now, that's a great feature, great talking point. Everyone loves that story. That said, that doesn't typically sell it. What does is me taking this product to my accounts that have travel programs, that have auto programs, because it's a fantastic folding umbrella. It fits in a glove box. That's massive. Now, all of a sudden, they can take that information and they can provide it to the customer in a way that makes immediate impact. It's something that resonates in a way that, look at how pretty this is, will never. It has to be relatable, it has to be well positioned, and it's just the only way to really do it. I often tell them, I don't need you to remember my product. I know my product line way better than you are ever going to. So you leave that to me. I'm the product consultant, you're the client consultant. When you need product or you have a project, I will curate what you show.
That makes a lot of sense, especially, there's so many products. Every supplier has so many products, and every distributor works with so many suppliers that thinking of it as you're the product consultant. I'm just here to help you find out what the best thing is going to be. You just have to
Absolutely.
tell me about your clients.
Exactly. And explaining why. I've got an enormous amount of umbrellas, a truly enormous amount. What about these ones that I've selected for you made them worth the cut and not the others? Like what specific features about those made this the best fit for that client? You have to tell them that because ultimately I'm preparing their pitch. I'm giving them the bones with all those features and little case studies that allow them to go to their customer and sell it more effectively.
Um, so that's the product side of things, but at the core of all of this, as we've been talking about, is those relationships. Is there a specific time you can remember that your relationships and those strong foundations that you've built with your distributors enabled you to kind of make a sale that you might not have otherwise?
Absolutely. That was when I got to a point where the trust was so deep between myself and my distributor partners, they started to bring me into their meetings with their clients. And that to me is the ultimate proof of concept. When they are now so comfortable with you that they are willing to bring you into a meeting with a client that potentially pays their mortgage, pays for their kids' tuition, all those different things. When they are willing to bring you into that, that is the highest form of trust that exists in our industry, because that's everything. That is the most privileged information that exists, and it is a true gift when a distributor allows you into that dynamic.
Absolutely, for sure. Okay, well, Katie, thank you so much for sharing some of your insights with us today. Are any final tips that you have for anyone listening about how to build up some of those supplier distributor relationships?
My biggest tip, I think I said it somewhere else earlier this month, was um, you have to be authentic. You have to be yourself. And I know that that sounds so cliche and we hear it. I mean, how many times do we see that on Instagram right now in Reels? But it is so true. If someone feels that you are not being your authentic self, how are they ever going to put faith in you, put trust in you? And as a supplier rep, that is truly the currency that we use to sell product. So you, even if it takes you a year to prove to someone, and it did with me, I won't lie to you. There were a couple of people when I first started in sales who thought, oh, no one can be this happy all the time. This has got to be a shtick. That like this is abnormal. And finally, there was this one woman who was so hard on me, and she made like no bones about it. Like she didn't even try to be nice for the first year. And then one day, I was in that office. It had been a year or so that I'd been working with them, and she pulls me into her office and she says, "Shut the door behind you and take a seat." Okay. So I sit down and, she's sitting behind her desk and she just looks over at me and she says, "This is just you, huh? You are just like this." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's me." And from that point on, I was just her girl. Like there was nothing she worked on that I didn't get a first call on. I went to her father's funeral. Like she came to my wedding. Like it was crazy. So, it was just funny though that it took her a very long time to find that trust in me and to believe that I was authentic, but stick with it. Just stick with it. Don't try to change yourself when you feel like someone doesn't like you. Keep being you, because most times it has nothing to do with you. It's about someone else trying to figure you out.
Yeah, I feel like that extends from what I've heard talking to other salespeople. That also extends to like the products that you're selling. It's like if you're not selling products that you can authentically vouch for, then what are you
Oh,
doing?
oh my gosh. It's so funny. Like you should see my personal top 10 list. Peerless has their own, but then I have mine. And mine is so funny because it is truly the products that I'm pushing every day into different things because of features they have that work really well for the end users that my distributors work with. So it's you have to be passionately just enamored with those products. That will sell them more than anything else.
Absolutely. Okay, well, Katie, thank you again for
Thank
joining this
you.
episode of Promo Insiders. It was a pleasure to talk with you. Everyone listening, have a great rest of your day.
Bye.